Equity and Economic Empowerment, Part 2 by Effie McMillian and Dr. Brooksie Sturdivant. In this session, we have 3 desired outcomes. We will review the establishment of inequality, counter the narrative of oppression, and provide strategies for economic empowerment. During Part 1, we shared the history of oppression from slavery through the Jim Crow era and the Civil Rights Movement. In more recent years, the battle for equality has continued with redlining, outsourcing of jobs, mass incarceration, and now gentrification. Throughout these time periods, African Americans made efforts to resist, yet the effects have been great. African Americans have experienced discrimination in education, employment, and housing. This reflects a persistent and concerted effort to control what we learn, where we work, and where we live. Because we've been marginalized in these 3 areas, this affects our access to systems such as transportation, nutrition, healthcare, legal support, banking, and entertainment and exposure. These are essential basic necessities for stability and success. As a result, we have not maximized on the benefits that come with a steady income, such as retirement options, insurance that includes medical, life, and burial, and even tax benefits, which gives us deductions, write-offs, so that we're able to maximize on our incomes that we do have. This long-term exposure to trauma has negative social, emotional, and psychological effects. Our academic genius has been suppressed, and what remains is disdain and hopelessness for far too many. This leaves some depending on social services and the welfare system, which is designed to provide only temporary support. Others spend what they earn in order to keep up with the Joneses, which oftentimes is to make up for what we have lacked and could not access for so long, or to establish an identity and esteem despite obstacles. This hinders our upward mobility and leaves us buying versus selling, borrowing versus lending, and begging versus giving.
As we continue to talk about economics, I want you to listen in closely to this video as it talks about race and place in American society in regards to upward mobility. And as he even puts into perspective different groups of people and their likelihood to move up the economic ladder in America.
We're going to talk about inequality and opportunity in America. Let's start by dividing the population up into 5 equally sized slices. If you're boring like me, you might call them quintiles. In an absolutely equal society where everybody had the same amount of money, each 1/5 of the distribution would get 1/5 of the money. It would look like this. Of course, that's not how it is. In the real world, the bottom quintile, the bottom 1/5, gets 5% of the money, and the top 1/5 get more than half the money. But I think in terms of fairness, and certainly in terms of American fairness, the question's less what's the gap between the bottom and the top, and it's more what are your chances of making it from the bottom to the top? How mobile is society? How far does where you're born on the ladder affect where you end up on the ladder? So in a perfectly mobile society, an opportunity utopia, being born down here in the bottom quintile would have no effect on where you ended up. You'd be equally likely to make it to the top as to stay at the bottom. But now I want to show you what it's really like. Right now, for the people born at the bottom, more than 1 in 3 of them will remain stuck at the bottom, and just 1 in 10 are going to make it all the way up to the top. That's bad enough, but it's even worse for certain groups in the population. If you're born in the bottom quintile and you're a Black American, you have a 50% chance of remaining stuck at the bottom and just a 3% chance of making it Horatio Alger style all the way to the top. So this is the picture for Black America. For white Americans, the picture looks close to that utopia with roughly the same chances of making it to the top of the distribution as of being stuck at the bottom. Those who are born at the bottom and are raised by parents who are never married. And for that group, the odds of making it to the top are pretty slim as well. For them, it looks like this. For those raised by married parents, it looks like this. Again, it's pretty close to what you might hope for in a perfectly mobile society. Those who are born at the bottom, if they're raised by married parents, have a pretty good chance of making it to the top. So if you don't complete high school, there's a 50% chance you're going to stay stuck at the bottom if you were born at the bottom, and a 1% chance that you're going to make it to the top 20% of the income distribution as an adult yourself. So for them, it looks like this. If you're born at the bottom, born in this bottom fifth, but you're one of the few born down here who managed to get a 4-year college degree, transforms your chances of moving up the income distribution. Go to college. We can have a long argument about the gap between the rich and the poor, but I think we can all agree that we don't want to live in a society where you're born determines so strongly your chances in life of where you end up. America has a dream of equal opportunity, and we're a very long way right now from that dream. We have a big problem, and we need big solutions.
So I think that's a very enlightening video. And this would be a good time to really pause and just think about what resonated with you, what struck you while watching the video, and what have you noticed within your own community and experiences of how this plays out and the reality of what you see, know, or what you have heard about in terms of the wealth gap and economic mobility for various groups of people that live in our society. As we continue, though, I want to take us to the Self-Sufficiency Standard Report that is created yearly for the United Way. This report basically looks at different configurations of families and determines how much income is needed for those family structures to be self-sufficient, meaning if they are self-sufficient, they do not need any income assistance or any other type of assistance from either a public or a private agency. So the information pulled from this report is strictly based on Greene County. So if you notice here, this pie graph is broken down into how income is spent, the expenses that families in Greene County has. If you notice on the pie graph too, is that child care represents about 42% of all expenses that a family would have. 15% for housing, food, and health care are second, then transportation, and then miscellaneous would be any of those needs that you have, like if you're buying cleaning supplies, or if you are doing things for entertainment, going to the movies, going bowling, going out to eat, things that you would really do for fun. Miscellaneous are those things that oftentimes come up that you need to spend money on that may haven't been planned for either. As we go a little bit further at looking at this self-sufficiency report and the poverty measure, if you notice, there's two pie graphs here. The first one on the left says that food is 1/3 of the budget and all other costs are 2/3 of the budget. And that's where the federal poverty measure is. If 47% of their basic needs are covered by federal poverty guidelines. However, on the right side, in order to be self-sufficient, notice this is for 2 adults, 1 infant, and 1 preschooler. Housing and child care account for almost half of the family budget in order for them to be self-sufficient. So they would need income or money to cover those expenses, as well as other expenses that they have without needing assistance from private or public sources. This image right here just gives a breakdown of the income self-sufficiency wage for one adult and one preschooler across different counties in North Carolina. If you notice, Greene County is color-coded a light shade of blue, which says that if this is a family that has one adult and one preschool child, in order for them to be self-sufficient, they would need to make an annual income of $35,192 to $39,904. So basically, if we round that up, that's almost $40,000, a little short of $40,000 in order to be self-sufficient for one adult and one preschool child. If you look at other counties, those income ranges may change for one adult and one preschool, and some of that is related to cost of living for those areas. Again, this image just highlights the fact again of what that map of North Carolina just showed, showing that one adult, one preschool child, that family structure would need to make at least $35,000, a little over $35,000 in order for the family to be self-sufficient. Here in Greene County, this also gives us other indications of what income needs to be for different family structures to be self-sufficient. So if it's one adult living on their own, they would need to make $8.72 per hour to be self-sufficient. But as we know, the minimum wage is $7.25. So one full-time job working 40 hours a week at $8.72 is what they need to be self-sufficient. However, if this individual adult is working a full-time job, 40 hours per week, and only making the minimum wage per hour, which is $7.25, that adult is not considered self-sufficient. They would actually struggle to meet all of their basic needs. And that's what self-sufficiency is about. Am I making enough money to meet my basic needs, which is food, housing, clothing, child care expenses, the necessities. That's when I think about basic needs, it's kind of the necessities, not the things that I want, but the things that I need to be able to live. If the family structure is one adult and one preschooler, that one adult would need to make $16.75 an hour. Again, if they're working a minimum wage job, the minimum wage job is only $7.25, which means this family would not be able to be self-sufficient. If we keep moving on down the line, you notice that one adult with a preschooler and a school-age child, that adult in the home would need to make $20.38 an hour in order to be self-sufficient. For two adults, one preschooler and one school-age child, each adult would need to make $12.22 per hour in order for the family to be self-sufficient, meaning meeting their basic needs. Last but not least, the last family structure shows us two adults with an infant, a preschooler, and a school-age child. In this case, each adult would need to make $15.41 in order for the family to be self-sufficient. So a minimum wage job, $7.25, given to any of these family structures, the families would struggle to be self-sufficient. In most cases, they would not be self-sufficient and they would need some type of assistance, whether it was private assistance or if it was public assistance, but they would need some type of help in order to meet their basic needs. So for Greene County, if we delve a little bit deeper, as I stated on the slide before, a minimum wage job is just not going to be enough to cover basic needs to live in North Carolina, and particularly not in Greene County. So even if we looked at a family that has one adult, the preschooler, and a school-age child, that one adult would need to work 112 hours a week to meet their basic needs. And so in many cases, families, the adults in the families may work more than one job to try to make ends meet. Still, in this case, if the family was working a minimum wage job, working $7.25 an hour, they would need to work 112 hours a week just to be self-sufficient, just to be able to meet their basic needs. So that is really something for us to think about, is that families, adults and families, are working really hard and they are still struggling to be self-sufficient, to meet the expenses needed for just their basic needs, hence pushing them further in debt at times, creating more challenges for moving up the economic ladder, and making families make some really tough decisions about how they live, where they live, and just the things that they have to sacrifice even with their basic needs being met. So I like this quote because it says you cannot budget your way to self-sufficiency. If one's income is not enough to be self-sufficient, it's hard to budget and to save for those rainy days. We're often told to save for a rainy day. But if my income is not meeting my basic needs, and I'm barely making it from paycheck to paycheck, it's hard to budget in order to be self-sufficient and or to save for a rainy day. And so what happens is, I think about it oftentimes, is that if I do not make enough money to be self-sufficient and I do need public assistance to help fill that gap for me, one of the systemic things, structural things that has been created is that when people begin to make more hours or get pay increases or they get another job where they make more money and can be self-sufficient, those benefits that they're receiving begin to be cut immediately before they've been able to save up for that rainy day, before they've been able to really budget for meeting all their basic needs, before they have an opportunity to get on their feet, so to say, and so to speak. So if I haven't been given the opportunity to get on my feet, and all my assistance to help fill some of those gaps for me are taken away immediately, families continue to struggle. And it perpetuates a continuous cycle of saying, well, I can't make it this way and I need the help. So some people make a tough decision too to say, I'm not going to work this job making extra money, or I'm not going to take on a second job, because once I do, then I lose benefits too soon for me to really get on my feet and to become truly self-sufficient and to begin saving so that I can be self-sufficient in the long run. Here are some of the wages, top wages, and even these are not enough, because in Greene County you would need to make $20.38 an hour for one adult, the preschooler, and a school-age child. So the only top paying job is to be a registered nurse, which you would make $29.03. And so I think the statistic at the bottom of the screen makes a good point, that 23% of North Carolina workers hold jobs in these occupations, which does not allow them to be self-sufficient. So it's definitely something for us to think about in terms of the challenges that people face every day when they get up and they go to work and they work hard all day and they still don't make enough money to meet their basic needs for them as a single adult or them as an adult with children. And so this just kind of shares a little bit more and about emergency savings. So self-sufficiency standard, it calculates for each county in North Carolina how much income families of various sizes and compositions need to make ends meet without public or private assistance, which I've said before. But notice at the bottom, once they've made that money, then there's very little that might be left over for an emergency savings fund. And so if we think about it, if I'm struggling to be self-sufficient because of my income, and when those incidental things happen, a car repair, someone gets sick, something breaks, it must be repaired, or, the teacher asks for supplies for a project for a child to make, all of those things that come up that we oftentimes do not plan for. Notice how that can add extra financial burden to a family, making it more difficult for them to be self-sufficient and making it more difficult for those emergency savings funds to increase and grow over time. And so, as I stated before, once your basic needs are secured, it is important to begin saving for emergencies, because we never know when those incidental things are going to come up. What is shared through this report is that if these are my living expenses that I need, that I have to have, and these are the monthly things I'm having to spend money on, we really do need to work hard to save, because we never know, too, if we might lose a job. And if I receive unemployment benefits, those unemployment benefits may not equal the amount that I currently bring home on my job. And so what is suggested is that we have enough money saved up to cover those expenses for at least 3 months, because the average job loss is normally about a little over 2 months, so getting close to 3 months. Now, during the pandemic, it was even longer than that, and there have been other times in American history where jobs were leaving our areas, communities, businesses closing, and there was no opportunity, or very little opportunity. So there have been times where it may have taken a person 6 months to get a new job. And so we have to think and ask ourselves, if I was to lose my job tomorrow, would I have enough money saved up to carry me and to maintain my basic needs, or my family's basic needs, for at least 3 months? And for a lot of families, they can't say that they do, because their income is already not enough for self-sufficiency. And so any of the things that I have mentioned earlier, with car repairs, sickness, job loss, any of those things can really create a financial downfall for a family, especially a family that may already be struggling due to lower income than is needed to meet their basic needs. And so I'm just going to leave you with this. This analysis shows us, and hopefully what you have taken away, is that with most common occupations in North Carolina, the wages of those occupations demonstrates that the economic insecurity faced by many of North Carolina's workers does not reflect a lack of work effort, but simply that wages in most common occupations are too low to meet basic needs.
In a capitalist society, you have sellers and buyers. One concern for African Americans is the amount of money we spend, and I too am guilty. These recent memes on social media regarding the COVID-19 stimulus deposits gave me a good laugh, because they are so true. At least for me, they are. Direct deposit. $1,400. Me at Red Lobster. Let me get the whale. And then there was this one. Me. Can I have an Oreo McFlurry? McDonald's. The machine is down. Me. How much it costs to fix it? As soon as I get money, I make a list of the things I've been wanting. Notice I said wanting, not needing. Take a moment to consider your last 5 purchases, 5 things you've bought. Were they needs or were they wants? According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, Black households spend on average about $36,150 per year. That's about 80% of the average income before taxes. The amount spent on housing consumes the largest portion of those expenses at about 1/3, followed by transportation and food. The remaining is spent on personal insurance, pension, health care, entertainment, cash contributions, clothing, and education. This also includes personal care items like toiletries and hair products, tobacco, alcohol, reading materials, and other miscellaneous expenditures. While most of the things I just named would be considered needs, they tend to exhaust all of our income, leaving little left for savings. So when an emergency occurs, such as divorce, layoff, or the passing of a spouse, we tend to fall behind on our bills and then go into debt. In order to improve our economic standing, we must stop acquiring debt, slow down on our spending, and go full speed ahead with our savings and acquiring the skills needed to increase our incomes. So I'm not speaking to you from something I read, something I researched. I'm actually speaking to you from experience. Prior to getting married, just in 2017, I was actually single for a full 38 years. And for a huge portion of my adult life, I pretty much lived off a teacher's salary, which, as you know, in the state of North Carolina is not that good. So with that being said, I struggled. I had to make some tough decisions. I did acquire debt. It started as early as when I was in college with limited support. I did get a credit card and I ran it up. So in my 20s, I really worked to try to pay that off. And then there were things that I wanted. I wanted to purchase a home rather than rent. I wanted to have a nice car. So because I desired these nice things, yes, I did go into debt, trying to get furniture, trying to get televisions, because again, I'm living off this single person salary. And then there were student loans, which if you know anything about student loans, yes, they do have an interest rate, even though that interest rate is not as high as a credit card, it still accrues interest. And if you're in graduate school, which I did go back to graduate school, they give you the option to not pay on those. But guess what? While you're not paying on those, they're still accruing interest. So with that being the case, the student loans did tend to grow and grow and grow, even though I wasn't taking any more student loans out. So by the time it was time to start paying those back, it's basically like another car payment. Yes, out of control. So at some point, enough was enough. And I did realize, okay, you got to stop spending. You do need to start saving. And I just needed to get a handle on my finances. So with that being said, there were a number of decisions that I had to make. I had to learn how finances work. What is the best decision to make in certain instances? So on the screen, as you can see, a few things that I had to ponder, and I wanted to challenge you to think about these, is when do I use debit? When do I use credit? When do I spend? When do I save? When do I use cash? When do I finance? When do I buy or when do I choose to rent? Because there are more things to rent other than homes. You can rent furniture. There are a number of things you can rent. You can rent a car or lease a car. So those were some of the tough decisions I had to consider, and I wanted to challenge you to do the same. So with regard to debit or credit, there are times when it's good to use credit. Credit cards sometimes offer you cash back. You can get perks such as hotels and airline flights and things like that using those points. So the main thing to know with credit is, can you pay it off really, really quickly? So you can charge things, get the perk, and then pay it off. But ultimately, we shouldn't spend money that we don't have. So that's just a note or a thing to consider. Because for me, my initial credit card was just that, a credit card with a high interest rate. So with time, I did become a little bit more wise and decided to get one that was affiliated with a hotel. So that then helped me to save whenever I needed to travel, whether it was for work or for pleasure. So that's just something to consider. And then I also had to make some tough decisions about cash or finance. When my mother passed away, I did get a lump sum of cash, and usually our thought is, ooh, I'll use this money to do this. I'll use this money to do that. Oh, I'll use this money to pay this off. But I had to kind of pause and think, well, if I just spend all of this money, I'm going to be right back in the same predicament, which then could result in me needing to charge or basically right back at ground zero. So I paused and I didn't just spend the money. One thing to note is there are times when you shouldn't spend your cash, and maybe you should finance and go ahead and make monthly payments until you pay it off. The main thing to consider is the interest rate. I mentioned student loans. Student loans do have a much lower interest rate than a credit card. So that's not something I'm going to rush to pay off because it's not eating up as much of my money. Whereas with a credit card, it has a higher interest rate, so you really want to try to get rid of that as soon as possible. Now, there are times when the credit card could have a 0% interest rate for a short period of time, 6 months, sometimes even up to a year. In that case, maybe you do want to charge some things on that card to go ahead and pay them off within that time frame so that you're not accruing interest. That would be wiser than just spending all of your cash at once. So some things to be aware of is zero payment down, like when you're trying to purchase something and it says zero down. The tough thing with that is they're going to charge you the interest. So if you have some cash that you can put down and it's not going to hurt you to spend that portion, I wouldn't spend all of my cash to put it down on something like a house or a car. But if you put zero down, you're going to be paying on it longer, which is just giving them more in the interest. So those are some things to consider. When you have cash, you just have to decide, should I use this cash? Should I use a portion of this cash? Or is it wiser for me to finance? And if you're going to finance, you definitely need to pay attention to the interest rate and the terms of that agreement. So I mentioned, should I spend or should I save? Should I spend portion of my lump sum or should I save it? The thing to think about with that is usually it's better to invest your lump sum rather than spending it. Once it's gone, it's gone. But if I invest it and I can get it to accrue some interest, because guess what? Just like they can take your money when you spend it with them and charge you interest, you can actually accrue interest if you decide to put your money in an investment account like a money market account or an IRA or something like that. So I would say hold on to money if you do come into a lump sum rather than just spending it. Unless it's for a down payment and you're just going to give a portion, i.e. for a car or for a house, because ultimately you can get your payment lower, the actual monthly payment lower, and you can save on the interest that they're going to charge you for that longer term. Anytime you can save, that would definitely be my vote. So then I also had to consider, do I buy or do I rent? So early on in my early 20s, I say I was about 23, I did decide to go ahead and buy a condo. rather than renting an apartment. I was pretty settled. I was starting to teach at a school. I knew I wanted to at least work there 4 to 5 years in that particular school district. So I was like, why would I rent that long when I could actually buy? It helps to boost your credit. And it allows for a number of tax benefits. I mentioned that earlier because in my case, I didn't have any children, so I didn't get that earned income credit as the head of household. So with that being said, the condo purchase was a good idea because it did allow me those tax benefits. I was able to itemize any donations and things like that, and the interest that I was paying into the condo. Fast forward, I was also able to use that as a rental property. When I did switch school districts, move to a different system, I was able to purchase a home in that system and use that condo as a rental property, which then boosted my tax benefits all the more. So that early investment and decision to buy was wise because it did help me financially in the long run. Now, if you're only going to be in an area 2 to 3 years, you know it's pretty much temporary, then you should go ahead and rent because it might be troublesome to try to sell, especially if you're not interested in being a landlord, because there's definitely some, challenges that come with that. So just that decision to buy or rent, to lease a car or to not. If you know you're not going to be driving long distances, sometimes it is better to go ahead and just lease that car, especially if you like to switch cars more. But there's no real written rule. You just have to figure out what's best for you. Thinking about your down payment, thinking about that monthly payment, thinking about your credit. You just have to try to make the decision that's best for you. The main thing to note is that when you're considering a house, the perks that come with the purchase of a home are usually very good. And I would say with a car that depreciates so quickly, I choose not to put a lot of money down on a car if I have a lump sum. I'll put some, but just not all of it or a lot, because cars do depreciate, whereas houses usually appreciate or increase in value. So considering all that you've heard and all that we've shared, which is most important? Money, time, or skills? I'll pause to give you a moment to consider. Hopefully you selected skills. The truth is, we can have money and no time, or time and no money. But if you have skills and time, you can always make money. Education provides us with knowledge, and embracing a variety of experiences allows us to explore our interests and develop skills that we can use to increase our income. We must tap into our creative genius and believe that we have what someone else needs. Take a moment to think about your top 3 skills and consider ways you can use those to increase your income. Also consider low-cost startup businesses. There are a number out there, a number of ideas online. So if you could do a quick Google search of business ideas or low-cost business ideas, that could also spark some interest. This past summer, I actually used a lot of cucumbers and made some bread and butter pickles. So you never know what you can do until you try. So I definitely want to encourage you to explore the many options that are out there. You could try your hand at photography. A lot of people are going into the delivery and the Uber driving type businesses. And another thing to consider is the fact that a number of African Americans are starting entrepreneurships and their own side businesses, and a lot of them need assistance. So if you're really tech savvy, love to do things on the computer, consider helping out someone else who's in startup mode. Even if you take it on as a part-time job or just as needed basis, that is definitely extra income, and then you're helping another Black business get off to a good start. If you're into graphic designing, layout, formatting, people need assistance with those particular things within their own business. So that's definitely something to consider. Just know that the possibilities are endless, and you definitely have something to offer, and people will pay you money for what you have to give. We also have to inspire the next generation to embrace opportunity. I would like to share that the state of North Carolina offers 16 career clusters or pathways through the CTE Career Technical Education offerings for high school students. Notice that there's 16 career categories, and within those, there are a number of job opportunities. Through the CTE program, students can do internships, they can earn hours, they can pretty much graduate from high school with an associate's degree if they take the right courses and really get on that pathway early. So it behooves us to make sure that our students in our community are aware of these opportunities and actually taking advantage of those. If they're struggling and don't really know their area of interest, this is a great website that you see on the screen, www.nccareers.org, nccareers.org. On that website, that bulleted list shows different offerings. On the website, you can do a little inventory to find out what your interests are. From there, it pairs you with one of these cluster areas, and from there, you can explore all the career or occupational choices under that particular career cluster. There's a portion on the website where you can actually plan out your career, so it'll give you information about what it takes to truly pursue that particular occupation, the education and the training that's needed, and you can even search for jobs there. People actually post job opportunities, internship opportunities, and things of that nature. So this is a powerful tool, and we really need to work with our children early to get them on one of these pathways. So just keep that in mind and know, like I said, the possibilities are certainly endless. Thank you for tuning in.